The smell of stale lilies still clung to the air, a heavy, cloying scent that mirrored the grief settling deep in my bones. My daughter, my beautiful Claire, was gone. It had only been a few weeks, and the world felt muted, gray. My son, Tom, and his wife, Sarah, had been ever present since the funeral, fluttering around with a solicitousness that felt just slightly off-key. I appreciated the help, of course. My husband had passed 5 years prior, and now Claire. The silence in the house was deafening. I felt adrift. It was Sarah, perched on my late husband's favorite armchair, who first voiced it. "Mom, this house, it's really quite large for one person, isn't it?" she said, her eyes scanning the familiar living room, the room where we'd celebrated countless birthdays, Christmases, milestones. Before we dive into the story, let us know where you're watching from in the comments below, and if you believe family should protect, not exploit each other. Hit that like button and subscribe for more. For years, I had been the family's steady anchor. My husband and I had worked hard, saved diligently, and ensured our children had opportunities we hadn't. We helped Tom with a down payment on his first condo, assisted Claire when she needed help starting her small business. I'd always been generous, perhaps overly so, believing that family took care of each other, that shared prosperity was the goal. My comfortable home, paid off years ago, was more than just bricks and mortar. It was the repository of a lifetime of memories, a sanctuary. After my husband's death, I'd adjusted to living alone, finding a quiet rhythm in my routines, surrounded by familiar objects and the ghosts of happy times. Claire's death had shattered that rhythm, leaving me vulnerable and raw. And it was precisely this vulnerability, I would soon discover, that my daughter-in-law intended to exploit. But what she discovered next would force me to choose between family loyalty and self-preservation. My life had shrunk in the last 5 years. First, losing George, my husband of 45 years, left a gaping hole that never truly closed. Then, just this past month, Claire was taken from me in a senseless accident. I was 68 years old, living alone in the house George and I had built our lives in. It was a substantial property, a comfortable 4-bedroom home with a large garden in a desirable neighborhood. It was mortgage-free, a source of security and peace of mind. My only remaining child was Tom, my son, a good-natured but somewhat passive man in his early 40s, married to Sarah, who was efficient, outwardly charming, and, I was beginning to suspect, acutely interested in my finances. I had a decent pension from my late husband's work, my own small pension from my part-time administrative job before I retired, and some savings. The house was my most significant asset, its value having appreciated considerably over the decades. I had always intended for my assets to be divided equally between my children, as outlined in my will. Claire's passing meant that, now, everything would technically go to Tom. Sarah seemed acutely aware of this. Sarah, in her early 40s, was sharp, ambitious, and possessed an uncanny ability to turn any conversation towards practicalities, particularly financial ones. Tom, bless his heart, was easily led, his opinions often sounding remarkably like Sarah's. They lived in a smaller, older home across town, constantly complaining about the need for renovations they couldn't afford, the rising cost of living, the pressures of raising their 2 children, my grandchildren, 12-year-old Emily and 10-year-old Sam. I adored my grandchildren and often helped them out, slipping them money for school trips or new clothes, buying their books. The hints started subtly. Sarah would comment on the size of my grocery bills, the cost of maintaining the garden, the property taxes. "It must be such a burden, Mom," she'd say, with a sympathetic sigh that didn't quite reach her eyes. "Especially now." Then came the suggestions. "Have you thought about downsizing, Mom? This house is just so much, or maybe you could rent out a room?" Though, honestly, dealing with tenants is such a hassle. One evening, about 2 weeks after Claire's funeral, they were over for a quiet dinner. Tom was distracted, picking at his food. Sarah, however, was unusually animated. Mom, she began, leaning forward conspiratorially. Tom and I have been talking. This phrase always set my teeth slightly on edge. It usually preceded a request or a directive masquerading as a helpful suggestion. We're really worried about you here all alone. It's not safe, and honestly, you need help managing everything. I bristled slightly. Sarah, I appreciate the concern, but I'm managing just fine. I have neighbors who check in, and I'm perfectly capable of taking care of myself and the house. But think of the future, she pressed, ignoring my protest. What if you fall? What if there's a problem with the house? We're thinking, maybe one of us should move in. Or, even better, you could sell this place and come live with us. We could add an extension. Emily and Sam would love having you. The idea of leaving my home, my sanctuary, felt like a physical blow. And the thought of living under Sarah's constant scrutiny was suffocating. Sarah, that's very kind, but I'm not planning on selling my home. And I value my independence. She waved a dismissive hand. Independence is all well and good, but practicality is important too. This house is worth a fortune. Selling it would give you so much financial freedom. You wouldn't have to worry about anything. And frankly, her voice dropped, becoming firmer. It would really help us out. We could use the money for renovations, maybe finally get out of debt. It was the bluntness of it, the casual assumption that my home, my security, was merely a resource for their problems, that first cracked the facade. My daughter had just died, and their immediate concern was how my house could help them out. A cold knot began to form in my stomach. Was this about concern for me, or concern for my assets? The true revelation, the moment the knot tightened into an icy fist, came a few days later. They were over again, ostensibly to help me sort through some of Claire's belongings, a task I was deliberately postponing, unable to face it. I had stepped out to the garden to deadhead some roses, needing a moment of quiet air. The kitchen window was open slightly. As I neared it, I heard Sarah's voice, sharp and clear. Honestly, Tom, it's perfect timing. Mom is fragile, vulnerable. She'll agree to anything. We just need to gently nudge her. Tom mumbled something in response, inaudible. No, not just move in, Sarah continued, her voice impatient. We need to get her to sign over the house. Or at least put our names on the deed now. Think about it. With Claire gone, there's no one else to split it with. It all comes to you anyway eventually, but who knows how long that will be. We need the money now. The house is practically ours already. We just need the paperwork sorted. My breath caught in my throat. Sign over the house? Put their names on the deed? It wasn't just about moving in or selling, it was about taking it. The casual, almost clinical way she discussed exploiting my grief and vulnerability, referring to my home as practically ours already, was sickening. My son said nothing to contradict her. The realization hit me with the force of a physical blow. This wasn't concern, it was calculated greed. They weren't comforting me, they were circling, waiting to strike. The grief was still a heavy shroud, but underneath it, a spark of something else ignited, a cold, quiet fury. My first instinct was shock, followed by a wave of profound hurt. This was my son's wife, the woman who was raising my grandchildren, the woman I had welcomed into my family. And Tom, my son, was just letting her? The betrayal cut deeper than I could have imagined. It wasn't just about the house, it was the cynical exploitation of my deepest pain. For a day or two, I wrestled with it. Could I have misheard? Was Sarah just brainstorming wildly? Surely, Tom wouldn't go along with something like this. I tried to rationalize it, to find an innocent explanation. Maybe they were just financially desperate and not thinking clearly. Maybe they truly believed it was in my best interest, warped as their logic was. But the overheard words replayed in my mind, sharp and clear, fragile, vulnerable, sign over the house, practically ours already, need the money now. There was no innocent interpretation. That evening, I walked slowly through my house, touching the worn edges of the furniture, looking at the faded family photos on the mantelpiece. This was my home. It held the echoes of my life, of George, of Claire. The thought of signing it over to be sold for renovations on their house, to be wiped away as if it meant nothing, was unbearable. A fierce, protective instinct rose within me, not just for the house, but for myself. I had survived losing my husband. I was somehow surviving losing my daughter. I would not become another casualty, dispossessed by my own family. That night, I went down to the basement, to the old metal filing cabinet where George had kept all our important documents. I found the deed to the house, the records of payment, the old mortgage papers stamped paid in full. I also located my will. I sat at the basement desk, the papers spread out before me, and read them carefully, even though my eyes burned with unshed tears. The documents were clear. The house was mine, solely in my name since George's passing. My will left everything to be divided between my children, or to Tom if Claire did not survive me. It was all straightforward, legally sound. My first small, defensive action was born not of panic, but of a growing resolve. I needed information, and I needed privacy. The next morning, I called my bank and scheduled an appointment with the branch manager. I explained, vaguely, that I wanted to review my accounts and ensure everything was secure in light of recent events. I also asked about setting up stronger online security and alerts for any significant transactions. It was a small step, but it felt like putting the first brick in a protective wall. It was also something Sarah had been subtly discouraging, suggesting she could handle all that complicated stuff for me. That alone told me I was on the right track. I didn't mention my conversation with the bank to Tom or Sarah. Silence, I was learning, could be a powerful tool. The days that followed saw the pressure subtly increase. Sarah started calling daily, sometimes multiple times. The conversations inevitably circled back to the house. Have you thought any more about what we discussed, Mom? Or, we really need to make a plan for the house. It's not good to leave things in limbo. She'd bring up minor repairs that needed doing, exaggerating their urgency and cost, implying I couldn't handle them. That leak under the sink really needs looking at, Mom. Tom could come, but honestly, it's a big job. Maybe it's a sign the house is just getting too old for you. They pushed for access. Could we come over and measure up? Just to see what kind of extension would be possible if you decided to move in with us. I politely but firmly deflected, saying I wasn't ready, that I needed time. My grief, once a genuine source of pain, was now being weaponized against me. Meanwhile, I started quietly documenting everything. I began keeping a small, spiral-bound notebook in my purse. I jotted down dates and times of their calls, the specific suggestions Sarah made, the subtle pressures applied. I started saving their text messages, innocuous on their own perhaps, but forming a pattern when viewed together. Questions about my finances, comments about the house, veiled suggestions of my inability to cope. I even started using the voice recording app on my phone, setting it to record discreetly when they were over, especially when Sarah launched into one of her monologues about the house or my future. I felt guilty doing it, but the memory of Sarah's chilling words about my vulnerability spurred me on. I needed proof, just in case. The legal consultation was the critical next step. I knew I couldn't navigate this alone. I made an appointment with an attorney specializing in elder law and property, recommended by a friend of a friend. I went prepared, taking my house deed, my will, the notes I had started keeping, and printouts of relevant text messages. The lawyer, a kind, sharp-eyed woman named Mrs. Davison, listened patiently as I recounted the events since Claire's death, my voice trembling a little as I described the overheard conversation. I showed her the deed, confirmed the house was solely in my name, and that there were no liens or encumbrances. Mrs. Davison was reassuring. "Mrs. Davis," she said, using my late husband's surname, "let me be clear. This house is yours. You own it outright. No one, not your son, not your daughter-in-law, has any legal claim to it while you are alive, unless you choose to give them one. Their suggestions are just that, suggestions. They have no legal power to force you to sell, to move, or to add their names to the deed. Relief washed over me, but it was quickly followed by renewed determination. They talked about getting me to sign it over. About putting their names on the deed, I said, my voice steady now. They think I'm fragile. That's a common tactic, Mrs. Davison confirmed, her expression hardening slightly. Preying on vulnerability. It's financial elder abuse, plain and simple. The good news is you are aware and you are taking steps. Awareness is your greatest protection. We discussed my options. First and foremost was protecting the deed itself. It was already secure, but Mrs. Davison advised against sharing copies or even discussing its location. We talked about revising my will to include specific conditions or even setting up a simple trust for the house, though for now, simply reinforcing my ownership and documenting their pressure was key. She explained that any attempts to pressure me into signing documents could constitute undue influence, which would make the documents invalid. She also advised me on how to handle future interactions, be firm, state my intentions clearly, that I am not selling or signing over the house, and if the pressure continued or escalated, issue a formal cease and desist letter from her office. Armed with legal knowledge, my resolve hardened. I wasn't just defending my home. I was defending my right to make my own decisions, to live my life on my own terms, especially in the wake of such loss. I wouldn't be pushed around, not by grief, and certainly not by greed. The pressure intensified dramatically after I started subtly pushing back, being less available, shorter on the phone, reiterating calmly that I was fine and not planning any changes regarding the house. Sarah sensed the shift. "Mom, you're being difficult," she snapped during one call. "We are just trying to help you. You're alone. You're not thinking straight. Letting us help with the house is the sensible thing to do." "Sarah, I appreciate the thought, but I have no intention of selling my home or changing the ownership," I stated, repeating the phrase Mrs. Davison had suggested. "I am thinking quite straight, thank you. But you can't stay there forever," she sputtered. "It's too big. The maintenance." "That is my concern, Sarah," I said, keeping my voice level. "I am managing it." The passive aggression escalated into outright manipulation. Sarah began involving my grandchildren. "Emily is so worried about you, Mom. She keeps asking when you're going to move closer," or, "Sam said the house felt so empty without Grandma and Claire," she was using the children, twisting their innocent concern into tools of guilt. It was a new low. Then came the fake emergency. I received a frantic call from Sarah late one afternoon. "Mom. Oh my God, Mom, you have to help us. There's been an accident. A huge gas leak in the house. We have to evacuate. But the hotel costs. And we need repairs immediately." She sounded genuinely distraught, and my heart initially leaped with fear for them and the children. "Are you all safe? Are Emily and Sam okay?" I asked, my voice tight with worry. Yes, we're out, but the house. It's a disaster. We don't know what to do, Mom. We don't have the money for this." Her voice rose hysterically. "We need help, Mom. We were thinking, maybe you could transfer some money? Just a temporary loan? Or maybe we could finally sort out the house. We could use some of that equity now to fix this." It was the abrupt pivot to my house and money, in the midst of a supposed crisis, that triggered a sudden, sharp suspicion. It felt too convenient, too perfectly aligned with their recent pressure. My hand, which had been shaking, stilled. "Sarah," I said, my voice deliberately calm, "have you called the gas company? The fire department? What about your insurance?" She faltered for a second. Well, Tom's handling that. It's all very chaotic." "Put Tom on the phone," I said firmly. There was a brief pause, muffled voices, then Tom's hesitant voice. "Hi, Mom. Tom, are you all safe? What exactly happened?" He sounded less panicked than Sarah, more uncomfortable. Yeah, Mom, we're fine. There was a smell. The gas company is coming to check it out. It's probably nothing," but Sarah got really freaked out. My suspicion solidified into certainty. "A smell? Probably nothing. This wasn't an emergency. It was a pathetic, transparent attempt to create one to access my money or leverage the house situation. The callousness of using a fake disaster to exploit my empathy, especially knowing what I had just been through, was unforgivable. I see, I said coolly. Well, I'm glad you're safe. Let me know what the gas company says. And Tom, don't ever let Sarah pull a stunt like this again. I hung up before he could respond. My hand was shaking again, but this time it was with cold anger, not fear. That was it. The line had been crossed. I wasn't dealing with misguided need. I was dealing with deliberate, malicious manipulation that was now actively harmful. I had hoped I could maybe deter them with quiet refusal and legal preparation. But they were relentless. It was time to switch from defense to decisive action. I would no longer simply protect myself. I would actively shut down their exploitation. My resolve was ironclad. The smoking gun, as Mrs. Davison later called it, wasn't one single document, but the pattern of behavior I had so carefully documented, culminating in the pathetic, manufactured gas leak emergency. My meticulous notes, the saved texts and emails, and especially the discreet audio recordings I had made during their visits provided irrefutable evidence of their intentions and tactics. The constant pressure, the attempts to isolate me, the thinly veiled threats about my competence, and finally, the fake crisis designed to extort money or leverage my property. Armed with this evidence, I met with Mrs. Davison again. We reviewed everything. The recordings of Sarah openly discussing getting me to sign over the deed, referring to the house as practically ours, and planning how to handle my vulnerability were particularly damning. Tom's hesitant confirmation of the gas smell scam exposed their joint effort in the deception. "This is powerful, Mrs. Davison said, tapping the stack of transcripts and printouts. This clearly demonstrates a pattern of undue influence, attempted fraud, and financial exploitation of a vulnerable person. It shows their intent was not care, but acquisition of your assets, specifically your home. My legal weapon was forged not just from the documents of my clear home ownership, but from the weight of their own recorded words and actions." Mrs. Davison explained our options. We could send a strong cease and desist letter, warning them to stop all communication regarding my finances and property. We could also file a formal complaint with Adult Protective Services and potentially pursue legal action based on the attempted fraud and financial elder abuse. Given the clear intent to manipulate me out of my home, she recommended the strong letter, backed by the threat of further legal action and reporting if the behavior didn't stop immediately. We also discussed steps to ensure they could not try any end-run maneuvers, like attempting to declare me incompetent, which their behavior suggested they might consider, given Sarah's comments about me not thinking straight. Mrs. Davison prepared documents for me to sign reinforcing my chosen powers of attorney and healthcare directives, ensuring my wishes were clearly documented and controlled by people I trusted, not Tom and Sarah. My counter-strategy was simple but effective: use the law and the truth to create an impenetrable boundary. I wouldn't engage in emotional arguments or explanations. I would let my lawyers' words and their own documented actions speak for themselves. I would establish clear, legal consequences for crossing the line. In the meantime, Sarah and Tom, seemingly unaware of the depth of my quiet preparation, continued their tactics. They were overconfident. They believed my grief had rendered me incapable of rational thought or action. They saw my quietness not as strategic observation, but as passive acquiescence. They were already mentally spending the equity from my home, their plans solidifying in their minds. They made a crucial mistake. They underestimated the quiet strength of a woman protecting her home, her independence, and her dignity in the face of betrayal. They thought they were dealing with a broken old woman. They were about to discover they were dealing with someone who had found a new kind of resilience in the ashes of her loss. The legal documents were served on a Tuesday afternoon. A process server delivered a thick envelope to Tom and Sarah's house. Inside was a strongly worded letter from Mrs. Davison's firm. It outlined the facts, my clear, undisputed ownership of my home, the documented pattern of their attempts to pressure and manipulate me into transferring ownership or providing significant funds, the specific instances of their behavior, including the overheard conversation about my vulnerability, the recorded discussions about the deed, and the attempted financial scam disguised as a gas leak emergency. The letter stated unequivocally that I was not selling my home, I was not transferring any assets, and any further attempts to pressure me, discuss my finances, or spread false narratives about my well-being or competency would result in formal legal action, including seeking restraining orders and pursuing charges for financial elder abuse and attempted fraud. It concluded by stating that all future communication regarding financial or property matters must go through Mrs. Davison's office. The effect was immediate and explosive. Sarah called me within the hour, her voice a mix of outrage and panic. "Mom, what is this? A letter from a lawyer. Are you serious? How could you do this to us?" "Sarah," I said, my voice calm and steady, "all communication regarding this matter will go through my attorney, Mrs. Davison. Her contact information is in the letter." But this is ridiculous. "We were just trying to help," she shrieked. "Help you into signing over my home and exploiting my grief? That's not help, Sarah. That's theft." "Now, if you'll excuse me," I hung up. Tom called shortly after, sounding bewildered and upset. "Mom, what's going on?" "Sarah's freaking out. We got some crazy letter." "Tom," I interrupted gently but firmly, "you heard Sarah planning to get me to sign over the house. You went along with the fake gas leak emergency. That wasn't helping me, that was trying to take advantage of me. I've hired a lawyer to protect myself and my home. You need to speak to her from now on." He stammered something about it being a misunderstanding, about Sarah getting carried away, about him just wanting to help. But the sincerity was gone, replaced by the sound of caught self-interest. It was confirmation, if I still needed it, that he was complicit, even if just passively. Word of the letter and the accusations of exploitation quickly filtered through the extended family, as I had quietly shared the essential truth with a few key relatives I trusted. The truth, backed by legal documents, was a powerful weapon against Sarah's attempts to control the narrative and paint me as senile or ungrateful. Instead of gaining sympathy, Tom and Sarah found themselves facing pointed questions and quiet disapproval. Their carefully constructed facade of concerned children, helping their grieving mother, crumbled under the weight of their documented greed. In their final desperate attempts, Sarah tried guilt. "How can you do this to your own son and grandchildren?" Threats, "You won't see Emily and Sam if you pursue this," and even pathetic attempts at reconciliation. "Let's just forget about this, Mom. We'll never mention the house again." But it was too late. They had shown me who they were. Their words held no weight against their actions. I did not respond to their calls or messages, adhering strictly to the boundary set by my lawyer. The house was quiet again, but it was a different kind of quiet than the silence of grief. It was the quiet of a space reclaimed, a life protected. I sat in my living room, the afternoon sun warming my face, a cup of tea in my hands. The legal victory was swift and decisive. The cease and desist letter, backed by the undeniable evidence I had gathered, was enough. Faced with the reality of legal action and the exposure of their scheme, Tom and Sarah backed down completely. There were no court battles, no drawn-out public fights. Their attempts to access my finances were blocked. Their hopes of acquiring my home were extinguished. My family dynamics were permanently altered. Tom and Sarah learned the hard way that entitlement and manipulation would not yield my security. My boundaries were clear and reinforced by legal steel. I had protected my home, my independence, and my peace of mind. The cost was the relationship with my son and his wife, a painful but necessary sacrifice. I began building a new life, one with stronger boundaries and a deeper appreciation for the friends and family members who had stood by me or simply respected my space and my choices. I found a local grief support group, started volunteering at the library, and reconnected with old friends. My home was my sanctuary once more, not a target. I had faced betrayal by those closest to me and had found the quiet strength within myself to stand firm. I had not just survived, I had prevailed, protecting not just my assets, but my dignity and my future. Thanks for watching till the end. If you enjoyed this story, give this video a like if you haven't already, and subscribe for more stories about standing up for yourself.